last week obviously was difficult. We wanted to give Thursday off for our players, to give them a week to be with their families and regroup and just an off day really with everything going on, and then in tribute to George Floyd as well. But we had conversations last week on lots of topics. We touched on what was going on in the world. We split up in position meetings and had more in-depth conversations, and I think they're productive. I think from my point of view, I wanted to make a few points to them. The first being, as an organization, we recognized what happened to George Floyd was a terrible tragedy. It was a murder. The people accountable need to be held accountable. I think they will. The racial injustice, the police brutality towards people of color, it has to stop. And we're all hopeful that this is a catalyst for that change. I think that the second thing was that as an organization, we wanted them to know we support them from the top down. Michael has called me multiple times to talk through things. How can we help? How can we do different things? What resources can we be to our players, to help them, whether it's community relations, working on projects they want to work on, PR, how do they want to carve out a statement? We want to be there for them, and we support them through this time. And then the third thing was just the platform they have to inspire. I think I have a unique perspective coming from 10 years in the college game. I watched how those young men try to emulate NFL players, the way they dress and talk to the media and play and celebrate. I mean, that's a powerful position that these players have to touch young lives and try to inspire people to be better and young people to be better. And I know when I walk in that room and see the players in our team meeting room, I'm inspired by them. I'm enlightened by them, their life experiences. And so I think it was a difficult week, but I think it was a productive week as well.
Hey, Kliff, I know other teams have said players have shared some of their stories, and it's been pretty poignant for their teammates and coaches. I'm wondering if any of your players spoke up about things they've experienced at all within the meetings?
Yeah, like I said, we broke up into position groups. I wanted to be more of kind of an intimate setting for those guys. And a lot of guys talking to position coaches shared some really moving experiences and experiences that were tough for people to hear. But I think it was good for all of our team to have that type of setting.
Coach, Craig Fouey here. Just a question for you about Larry Fitzgerald's letter that he wrote yesterday and your reaction to that, and then Patrick Peterson and DeAndre Hopkins being involved in the video that was put together over the weekend. Those are team leaders. Those are guys that are out in front and sharing what's on their heart. Just your reaction to those guys being up front.
Just very proud. I mean, I'm honored to work with guys like that. As we know, Fitz is kind of what we all strive to be, I think, as human beings. When you look at what he's accomplished on and off the field, the way he carries himself, the way he treats people. And so it didn't surprise me. It's such a poignant piece. And hopefully that can touch some lives and inspire others. And then, Pat and Hop are very passionate about this cause as well. And so just to be able to work with guys like that who care about others and want to push change, want to change the racial injustice, I think that's very powerful stuff.
Okay, next three, we'll go Mark McClune, Catherine Fitzgerald, Josh Weinfuss, please.
Hey, Coach. Thanks for the time today. Hey, how much have you and the team discussed what the anthem will look like on opening day of the 2020 season?
We have not. Obviously, we're going to support our guys. They know that, but there's so much up in the air, right now as far as what the fall is going to look like on any level that we haven't touched on that.
Kliff, on top of the team discussions, I was just wondering, for you personally, as a white man in a position of power in a league that is predominantly Black players, where do you see your role in all of this, and has that changed at all over the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I mentioned earlier, but just I want all those guys to know how much I am honored and inspired to just be a part of their lives and be able to work with them, and guys at the top of their profession, guys who I look up to for certain things that they've accomplished and the way they carry themselves and things of that nature. And so I think I have to be a guy who listens more and learns more and understands more. And, there's so much that we can all do, and being in a position of power, working with these guys, I'm right at the top of that.
Hey, Kliff, Josh Weinfuss. Football question. Now that it seems like the offseason is starting to wrap up a little bit, where's Kyler? Where, we've talked about his development through all the virtual meetings in the past, but where do you see him now close to the end of all this?
I can definitely sense a comfort level with Kyler. We would all love to have been on the grass some, getting the hundreds of reps he would have gotten, but just talking through film with him, listening to the way he's seeing the game now, his understanding of concepts, he's definitely taken a step in that area, and that's all we could hope for right now. I mean, the physical stuff's going to be there. He's working really hard physically, throwing, doing all those things, but just the way he's seeing the game, the way we're getting on the same page seeing the game, I know that's going to continue. And the more we can all be on the same page as an offense once we finally get together, that's just going to try and help us take that next step.
Next three, please. Darren Urban, Craig Fouey, Jess Root.
Kliff, kind of following up on the football side of it, has Kyler had a chance, to get together with any of his teammates to actually physically throw to any of them? And at this point, do you have a good idea of when training camp might start and how that might look?
As far as Kyler with his teammates, I believe that's going to start happening this week and to kind of roll in to whenever training camp may be. Fitz usually gets those guys up there in Minnesota, and so I'm sure they're planning that all out the next couple of weeks. But training camp, I'm waiting, to hear how that's going to happen. I think the NFL has been smart and given us a couple of weeks at a time, and so that's where we're at. We should find out into this week a little bit more into our summer schedule, and then we'll just take it one step at a time.
Hey, Coach, question on your staff, too. You guys were allowed to get back in the building late last week. Are you back in the building, and how has that changed what you've been doing lately?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're not, as a staff, completely. We liked how things were flowing, so I came back in just for the morning, get some things settled. But we feel like our process has been smooth. We've been able to accomplish virtually what we wanted to accomplish. And until we have more guidance from the NFL this week, what the remainder of the offseason looks like, we wanted to just keep it flowing. And so the other coaches are not back as of today.
Hey, Kliff, kind of going with that. Obviously, you don't know when training camp's happening yet. You're keeping your coaches remote right now. What's left in the offseason program with the meetings with your players so far? What's left for them before camp?
Well, that's a great question. I think we're running out of ideas without taking it to the field and actually executing it. You can only cover so many things without actually practicing it, and I think we've about reached that point. But a lot of situational football things. We want to make sure they feel good about our offense, our defense, our special team schemes, but then also touch on situational football where at least we've touched on it heading into training camp.
Next three, we'll go Howard Balzer, Mark McClune, Josh Weinfuss, please.
Yeah, hi, Kliff. So much of the talk is about players, but you have a pretty diverse staff. What have been some of those conversations like with them as all of this has been going on? And then a quick football one, your reaction to some of the guidelines that the league had sent out about locker rooms and all those restrictions.
Yeah, staff-wise, I think just listening to, their stories, how they feel about what's going on, and also, what was shared in their position meetings. It's been a powerful, time for everyone. And having BJ, I talked to Mark Dalton today. I mean, BJ, for me as a first-time head coach, having him to be able to bounce things off of, questions off of, thoughts off of, talking through this topic of last week with him, was huge for me. And so it's been definitely an interesting conversation. And then what was the second part of that question?
That was the new league guidelines that were in the memorandum you guys have received.
Oh yeah. That's going to be ongoing. Obviously, I took a look at some of it. It's very extensive, which I think it's going to need to be. But I'm sure as things come up, it'll continue to be amended and changed. But they're definitely going to take every precaution necessary.
Hey, Coach, kind of on a lighter note, were you prepared for as viral the shot of you in the house was going to go during the draft? And how much has that been kind of a topic of fun in the Zoom meetings with the team?
Yeah, that was the very first team meeting I had on there. Of course, Fitz is like, "Hey, Coach, give us a house tour." So that's they've had fun with it, but it was a special circumstance having the draft at the house, and I think it was a slow news cycle, and so I'm glad that people were able to have fun with it.
Hey, Kliff, two questions for you. How comfortable do you feel sending your guys back on the field, considering all the health risks right now? And it seems like some of the numbers are going back up. And then the second part is, where specifically did Vance kind of help you through everything last week? And what did you take from his perspective?
Yeah, health-wise, that'll be dictated by the NFL, and they're taking every precaution, like I mentioned earlier. They'll make sure that when we bring guys back, whether it's this offseason or training camp, that every precaution necessary will be taken. And so we will follow those guidelines as best we can. And as far as Vance, just wanted to get his perspective as a guy who's been a head coach in this league and also an African-American male. Wanted to pick his brain on certain aspects of what was going on and what he thought. So he was huge for me. And he's been huge. It's not just that. I mean, things that I just didn't understand, didn't get about the NFL throughout my entire first year. He was here for me, and that really meant a lot to me.
Next up, we'll go Catherine Fitzgerald, Kent Summers, Jess Root, please.
I know we've talked a lot about the conversations with players at this point, and there's also just the whole aspect of all of this being remote and coronavirus still being a factor. So how do you balance when there are so many different things that are affecting players right now?
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that you do the best you can with, and you try to make sure you're here. I think letting them know you do care first and foremost, that's first and foremost is health and mental health and making sure everybody is okay. And then football is secondary. And I think that's one thing that our coaching staff has done a nice job of, is making sure, hey, we can get to the football anytime, but make sure these guys are okay. Make sure that if they need to talk, they can talk, and we're here for them on a level that's bigger than football.
Kliff, first, thanks for doing these. Really appreciate it. The conversations that have gone on in the country in the last week or 10 days since the murder of George Floyd, as Americans, we move on pretty quickly to the next thing. Do you feel like, as a coach, some kind of obligation to put some kind of mechanism in place so players have a way to speak about these things through the season, even within the walls of the building, to each other?
I think it'll definitely be ongoing conversation and ongoing process. I think the NFL, I think the Arizona Cardinals, I think us as a staff will definitely encourage that. And I mentioned earlier, we want to learn. We want to listen first and learn and try to be better from it. And so I definitely think that this is a conversation that will carry on, deep into our season and moving forward, hopefully.
Hey, Kliff, football related. Patrick has been he hasn't been shy about what he thinks the talent of this team is. Best team on paper that he's played on in a decade, championship caliber roster, he said. Obviously, do you mind hearing those type of big expectations from your players? I know you tend to be more understated, but do you mind hearing bigger picture expectations like that?
I like having a happy Pat P. I'll tell you that much. He's a guy who has a ton of confidence, ton of swagger, and guys feed off that. And so to hear the things, Pat said, we understand we haven't accomplished anything. He understands that. But I also like knowing that Pat wants to be here. He wants to be a part of this. He wants to help build this, and he wants to show other guys that he's in it, and he's excited about what we have. And I think that's important. So we're not going to make any predictions about winning Super Bowls, do anything like that. We know where we are, where we have to go. How much hard work's going to go into it. But I like that Pat is excited to be a part of this. I like that he's trying to show guys he's excited to be a part of this. And, that's a big step for us.
And it looks like Catherine Fitzgerald will have the last word today. So thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Mark. Kliff, on top of talking to other coaches and players around the NFL, have you been talking to any of the coaches in Arizona? I know Monty Williams, Bobby Hurley have been out at some of the protests. So do you talk to coaches here too about specific to Arizona things?
Yeah, I have not, but that's probably a good resource to use. I know, I played for Herm, so know him well. And so yeah, that's probably a good resource to tap into.